So what on earth happened to the American dream? You know, that simple idea that every single kid, no matter where they started out, had a fair shot at a better life. Well, today we're going to dive into Robert Putnam's landmark book, Our Kids, to try and figure that out.
This quote, it really just sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? It points to this kind of hidden wealth, this social fabric that used to hold everyone up. We're about to take a look at the world where this was true, and then explore what happened when that fabric started to completely unravel. Okay, so let's go back in time. Our story starts in a very specific place, Port Clinton, Ohio, back in the 1950s. Think of this little town as a perfect snapshot of a totally different America, one that was, in a lot of ways, way more connected and, well, more equal.
Let me introduce you to Don. Now, by today's standards, you'd say his family had next to nothing. His dad was a factory worker, worked 16 hours a day, they didn't have a car, didn't have a TV. But here's the thing they did have, incredible support. His dad never ever missed one of his football games. The whole community was in it together. In fact, Don himself said he had absolutely no idea he was poor until some college class told him he'd been deprived. That support system was everything. It was the launch pad for his whole life.
And this was just how it was back then. It wasn't about pretending class didn't exist, it was that the class is actually mixed. The richest kid in town lived just 4 blocks away from Don. They literally played kick the can together in the street. The social distance was so short you could walk across it in 10 minutes.
But then, a storm started brewing. That stable world of Port Clinton was about to get slammed by these huge economic and social forces that would just rip that community fabric to shreds, not just there, but all across the country.
And the breakdown happened so fast. I mean, in places like Ottawa County, where Port Clinton is, the divorce rate quintupled, just like that. The stable, 2-parent families that had been the foundation for kids like Don were suddenly becoming a lot less common.
And at the exact same time, you see this explosion in unwed births. In Port Clinton, it shot up from just 9% in 1978 to almost 40% by 1990. Think about that. It's a massive change in how families looked, and it happened in just over a decade.
And of course, the economic fallout from all this was just devastating. Factories started closing, families were breaking apart, and child poverty in Port Clinton just skyrocketed. It went from under 10% to nearly 40%. That safety net of community and good jobs, it was gone.
Okay, so let's fast forward and see what this fracture has created today. The result isn't one America with some challenges. No, it's 2 totally separate Americas, living right next to each other but in completely different worlds, especially when you're a kid.
Now this is where it gets really stark. You've got Don from the 50s with his stable home and the whole town cheering him on. And then you have David from the exact same town today. His family life is chaos, he has 0 adult guidance, and his friends, he made them in juvie. His outlook on life, he says, I always end up at the losing end. It's the same town, but it might as well be 2 different planets. So what is driving this massive split? Well, one of the key ideas is something sociologists call concerted cultivation. It sounds complicated, but it's basically this super intensive parenting style you see a lot in upper middle class families. It's all about organized activities, constant reasoning, and basically training your kid from day one on how to navigate and succeed in the world.
The book uses this amazing metaphor for it, the parental airbag. Get this, there's a story about a kid named Andrew whose sister started falling in with a bad crowd. Did his parents just cross their fingers? Nope. They built a barn, bought her a horse to take care of, and it completely turned her life around. That is the airbag in action, using your resources to cushion the blows and forge new paths.
Now, contrast that airbag with Kayla's story. She grew up in deep poverty. Her parents' relationship was a mess. She has absolutely no one, no stable adult in her life she can count on. And when you ask her what her greatest fear is, she just says, everything kind of falling apart. For her, there is no airbag. There's no net. There's nothing.
And here's a point that is so crucial. All of this constant stress and adversity has a real physical cost. They call it the John Henry effect. It's named after the folk hero who beat a steam drill in a race, but then died from the strain. It's the same for these kids. They might look like they're beating the odds, but the chronic stress is doing actual physiological damage. The wear and tear is just immense. You know, these stories are incredibly powerful, but they're not just stories. They're real-life examples of a trend we can measure all across the country. And when you look at the data, the picture of this opportunity gap gets even sharper.
Okay, look at this. Seriously, this might be one of the most shocking findings in the whole book. A rich kid with low test scores is now more likely to graduate from college than a poor kid with high test scores. Just let that sink in for a second. Your family's income has become a better predictor of your success than your own academic ability. It's wild.
So what's the big takeaway here? What's the fundamental shift? The book argues that we've gone through this deep cultural change. We've moved from a society with a collective sense of responsibility for our kids to a much more individualistic and frankly anxious focus on just my kids, even if it comes at the expense of everyone else.
And that brings us to the final, really challenging question. The author didn't call the book Their Kids. He very deliberately called it Our Kids. So if we actually agree with that, if we believe that these kids are all in some way our collective responsibility, then what do we do about it? What part do we play in trying to fix this fractured American dream?